Yeah, welcome to today's class. We are still on function. So today we are going to look at main function, which actually represents the soul. In the last class, I taught you um, the different parts of function that represent the trinity of a human being, which is the mind, the brain, and the heart, right? So in this class, I'm going to show you how to call the add function that we created in the last class using the main function, which is the entry point of any C programming language. So without wasting much time, let's just get right in. Now, I'm going to write the function that I wrote in the last class. Then I'm going to write the main function to call that function. So the function we wrote was int add, right? Then we say int a, comma, int b. And then we did this. Inside it, we declare another variable int sum. And then we put this a plus b inside. And then we say return sum, right? And then we close our curly bracket. So this is our function that we have written. This is our function, our add function. Now we want to call this function. But to call this function, we have to bring in the main function, which is what? Our soul. And in this function, I showed you the different parts. The part that represent the mind, the part that represent the heart, and then the part that represent the brain. I did that in the last class, which is this, and this. Now, in creating our main function, let's write a complete program. So I'm going to say hash include stdio dot h, right? So here I'm going to do this. So that is our function that we've created. Now this, I can decide to create this function inside this same place where I'm going to create the main, or I can create this function in a different file and then bring it in when I'm calling. So because I want this function to be created, I'm creating this function here, but I want the main to know that this function is already existing. So I have to declare this function inside this place. So I will say int add int a int b. So this is me declaring my function. Then I will come here and say int main. You can see this function has a return type, but there's no parameter applied to it. That's our main function. I told you different types of function based on the syntax of function that I wrote on the board. So I'm going to put my curly bracket because I will put many statements inside this place. So here I will declare a variable int a, and I will assign, I can give it a different name. I can leave it this way, or I can give it a different variable name, because this A is in this main scope, while this A is also in this main scope. Now I can say int A, and then I will say assign 5 to it. Then here I will say int B, I will say assign 7 to it. Then I will create another variable int result. I'm creating another variable inside this main function, and I call it result. And here I will now call this function. I will say add, and then I will supply this parameter to it. I will supply A and I will supply B, right? So this is another statement. And then here I will say return here I will say print. I will call my print function print f. I will say result is, then I'll put my format specifier /n, then I'll close this, Then I will say result. Then here I will say return 0. Then this, I'll close it here. Then this my function should be here, right? I'm creating my function here. So this is my main. Now let me explain. So this is my main function, which is actually the class I'm teaching today. This main function represents the soul. Now I've created this function, which is what? I have the intention of adding two numbers. This I have created, which is the mind. So I now have here, I have the mind. Here I told you the heart. And then here is the brain, right? And this main is now what? The soul. So this is where everything takes place. Now, this main is the one housing these two variables, which is A and B. I can give it a different name. I can give it X and Y. Why this one will remain A and B. So having A and B inside this place is a scope different from the A and B that is here. I create another variable called result, and then I'm calling this function here, and supplying the two parameters to it, which is what? 5 and 7. Now, what will happen is that these values will be copied, duplicated to this. So this A, this one will come to this guy, and this one will come to this guy. So in calling this function, the moment I call the function here, add, control will go to this guy. Control will come here. And then this parameter will be supplied. But the soul is not supplying the original value, right, to this. Is making a copy, a duplicate. Is making a copy of this 5 and the 7 and giving it to this guy. So 5 will be here, 5 will be here, and 7 will be here. Then it will come in. When it gets to this place, it will become 5 plus 7. And the result, which is 12, will be stored in this memory location, because a variable is a named memory location. So it will be stored here. And then this function will return, right? After this process takes place, the function will now return back to this place, which is what? The calling function. The calling function is main. So the output will now be returned back here, and it will be stored inside the result. Then the printf is also a function that will now be called. Now, where will you get the definition of printf? In this place, stdio.h. So the definition of printf is here. So this result will now come. This is a string literal. This one will be printed out on the screen, result. So what this will produce will be what? Result, right? Is then this is a placeholder, the format specifier, that will hold the value of result. And the output will be what? 12. So this is what will be printed out on the screen. Without this main function, you cannot access this guy. So this main function is the soul that is calling the thought and then supplying parameters to it. So this thought will now work on it, and output to be returned back to the soul and then display on the screen, which will now become what? An observed reality. That is how it works. Now, how are you calling this function? There are two ways to call the function. You can call by value and you can call by reference. I have actually used the first one, which is called by value, in this program. But in the next class, I'm going to explicitly explain this call by value concept for you to see how this was done. But in this class was for me to show you the main function and how you are going to call this function, which is your thought, from the main function, which is the soul. Now, this is called by value. In the next class, I'm actually going to explain this call by value in depth for you to see. And subsequent class, I will explain call by reference. So the two ways in which you can call a function inside another function. So that is what I want to show to you in this class. Maybe I should go to code blocks to demonstrate this simple call for you to see this output on the screen. So let's go to code blocks. So this is our code block, and I'm just going to demonstrate the effect of the main. Now you can see this is me declaring the variable add. Now I told you in the class that if I'm declaring a variable, I don't necessarily have to put the variable, but as you can see, the system, when you point the cursor to it, is actually showing you the declaration of the variable, of the function, and you have the variable int a and int b. Now this is my main, and inside this my main, I have my two variables a and b, and then I have another variable which is result. So I'm calling the function here and I'm supplying the parameters to it. So control will come to the function. This is the function definition. Then it will supply 5 to A and 7 to B. Then it will come in, it will add, and then it will store it in sum, and then it will return sum back to this place, and then it will print. So let's run this program and see what the output will be. So I'm going to compile it. You can see the result is what? 12. So that is all I want to show you in this class. How you are calling a function through the main function. And this is called by value, which I'm going to show you in the next class. So till we see in the next class. Bye-bye.